That in itself is an interesting collaborative development, I think. So it's in that sense a combination of impact-oriented innovation, supporting firms, intervening, doing things with organisations, as it were, but also researching. So we're combining impact and research in the project. The partners involved formally are Oxford Brookes Business School, Lancaster University, where I work, and University of Salford Business School in particular, and Hyperscale, which is a technology consultancy working out of the West Midlands and supporting specifically professional services firms. So we've been working together on this over, as I say, a couple of years. What we've done over that period, and particularly since the action really began in early 24, is that we've provided about 500 hours of various forms of support, training, development, mentoring, targeted consultancy advice to about 60 odd professional service firms. So we're aiming at mid-tier and smaller firms in law and accounting. And well, it's difficult to define exactly, but I think we've successfully accelerated adoption in 3/4 of the firms we've worked with. That being getting organizations to use technology that they've never used before, or speeding up and enhancing the adoption of technology to bring forward the process of innovation. And I think an interesting thing, which perhaps we didn't anticipate in quite the way it's played out, but all to the good, is that in doing so, not only does our support help, but it helps unlock resources in the firms that we've worked with. So that may be that we've supported firms, for example, to buy licenses to software, and they've provided additional license funding or seconded people into the project. So in various ways, there's been a kind of matching and amplifying effect from the firms who have been involved. And these firms, by the way, range from one-person firms to firms with hundreds of staff. So getting up towards the bigger firms in both sectors. We've also engaged through events like this, through events that we've organised, through events that we attend and participate in, and some of the TiPS team have been at the Accountex exhibition, the gigantic Accountex exhibition at Excel Arena in London over the last couple of days. So we've been present and visible and active at those kind of events in the law and accountancy context, as well as participating in events that have been run by the funders. We've also, as I said at the outset, been researching. So we've not only been supporting firms, but also trying to learn from what they do. So we've gathered lots of data by observing, interviewing, and so forth firms over the period, which will lead to our being able to advise firms beyond that 60 odd who we've worked with directly. And we also, in the course of that, worked with bodies of the kind that are represented this week, and indeed today, the professional bodies, government departments, and so on. And as a bigger question at stake as well for us, in that the challenge was to develop an innovation adoption accelerator for law and accountancy firms to adopt technology, but we're also thinking about how adoption of innovation can be accelerated in general. So that might be for net zero applications or healthcare. So there's a bigger question about how can we accelerate innovation. And this has involved us in taking ideas from acceleration and accelerators, which are almost entirely devoted to startups, accelerating the invention, the supply side, and applying them, or attempting to apply them and adapt them to suit adoption to the demand side. So we've got some general insights about how that does or doesn't work. For those some of you who have attended some of these sessions, this is what we've been covering this week, and obviously the details of the timing is now ancient history, or not so ancient history. But this is what we've talked about this week, and mostly we've been looking at some of the things we've learned and explored with our firms, looking at how to take a business perspective on technology adoption, to, and in some cases this is what we supported, make use of technology that's already there, and then looked at essentially the change management process. We are all business school academics. We're not computer scientists, and we're not law scholars or accounting scholars, but we're seeing it as an organizational challenge, and that's the way we've tackled it. Technology is important, but we think that organization and people are the essence of making these things happen. There's a couple of links for you there. Please check out our website under renovation at the moment. Follow us on LinkedIn, and now we'll move to today's session. So departing a bit from the theme of looking at adoption processes, we wanted to open out for this last session and look at some of the futures of professional services. Our web providers were a bit concerned about the grammatical accuracy of our for the first part of our title, but we thought rhetorically it made a nice little point. Our speakers today will introduce themselves, but we have I'll pick out the TiPS team. Katie Mason is on the call. Katie's at Salford University, Salford Business School. Ilona, you've already met, is the project manager at TiPS. And then we have our panel speakers, Simone Boekelaar at Innovate UK, Tara Chittenden at the Law Society, and Paul Madden from the MAPT group, who will explain more about the group in the law sector. The provocation for this session, I suppose, is partly the ever-receding, and I think the point is we don't think that lawyers are going to disappear tomorrow. It's a joke, but Richard Susskind, who some of the people on the call will have heard of and know, who's been researching AI in law since the 1980s, wrote in his book, The Future of Professions, so he is from a law background, but this was about professions more generally, wrote in 2017, "I do not see much of a future beyond 2020 for most traditional small law firms in liberalized regimes." I've got a hunch there are still some law firms, that there may even be some on the call. You've managed to survive to this point. So I think Richard's been saying that for a while, but we did interview someone recently who has followed Richard's work and thought, actually, with generative AI, maybe his time has come. So that's part of our question, maybe, is in the moment, is there something special happening? I've also just moved house, to a counterpoint to this, and the process felt more like 1950 or closer to 1950 than 2050. So there's certainly a way to go. Maybe there's a long tail. As I said, we've mostly concentrated on doing something now in TiPS. It's been about do a project in the relatively short term, but today we're going to open up to the longer term. And that's enough from me. Our panelists will each introduce themselves and talk about some of the themes that we've proposed, and then we'll take the conversation from there. And I'm going to hand over first to Tara, and I'll stop sharing the screen.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you for inviting me to the panel. Good morning, everyone. My name's Tara. I'm the Foresight Manager at the Law Society, and I sit within our strategy and impact function. So the Law Society, for those of you who are not familiar, we're the representative body of solicitors. We cover areas including policy, government lobbying, access to justice, international market access, and our members range from sole practitioners and small high street firms through to large corporate firms, global international firms, and in-house lawyers, themselves ranging from those in the Fortune 500 companies through to government lawyers to charity lawyers. So a very diverse range of membership with very different experiences of technology and how they manage the future. Much of my work lies in futures thinking, in horizon scanning, and helping our members to stretch what they imagine is possible, to think about alternative futures and to support and to help them navigate the future. And so my view of the future comes from horizon scanning, from using various futures tools that we might talk about later, comes from observation, patterns, pressure points, and paying attention to what's just starting to shimmer on the horizon. Martin mentioned Richard Susskind. There's been a lot of talk from Richard about where the profession is going, about AI, how much AI could eat the profession. AI is certainly already here, not as a single tool, not as multiple tools, but it's a force reshaping how we think, how we work, how we define value in professional services and the world of work. And I think it's been tempting to treat AI as the latest wave of legal tech, but it feels like this moment is different. What we're facing isn't simply about productivity or automation, it's about identity. What does it mean to be a lawyer? What does it mean to be a lawyer when a machine can draft, research, and even advise at scale? How do we hold on to the parts of the legal practice or professional services? How do we hold on to the parts of our roles that are human-led, values-driven, and culturally grounded? I was speaking recently to a tech journalist in the US who said we're living through a kind of AI adolescence. We're seeing astonishing growth, flashes of brilliance, plenty of mood swings, refusal to explain where it's been, forgets what it told you 3 days ago. And I'll leave it to those of you with teenagers to say whether those are good traits for teenagers or not. But what's really interesting to me was that it flagged two things. It flagged the idea that we've given a lifespan to where we think we are with AI and how much further we think it's going to go. But also, and something I'm really guilty of myself, is humanizing our relationship with tech, anthropomorphizing how we think and how we respond, and especially with Gen AI now giving more sort of human, convincing responses, how we interact with our technology. But today I want to begin with 4 provocations that I think could radically reshape the future of professional services. Some are already in motion, others are some of the weak signals we're starting to spot, but all are invitations to think differently. So let's start here. What if AI doesn't just change professional services? What if it eats them all together? We're at the beginning of a phase shift. So AI is no longer just a tool we use. Increasingly, it's a co-worker we collaborate with or a competitor we try to outwit. In legal services, AI can already draft contracts, summarize case law, guide someone through a divorce. In accountancy, it can flag risk and forecast scenarios. In consultancy, it's replacing whole decks of analysis overnight. So what happens when your entry-level talent is an algorithm? What happens when your senior partner is a prompt engineer? What happens when value shifts from knowledge to judgment, from knowing the answers to asking the right questions? The biggest strategic risk I see isn't that firms will adopt AI too slowly. It's that they'll adopt it in a way that preserves the old power structures, just faster, just cheaper, just more extractive. But the deeper opportunity, perhaps it's to build post-professional identities, ones that blend human depth, ethical reasoning, contextual awareness with collaborative intelligence. AI won't kill professional services, but it may kill the idea that being a professional knows more than anyone else in the room. So, second shift. What if being competent is no longer enough? Traditionally, professionalism meant a combination of expertise, neutrality, and ethical obligation. But that social contract is fraying. Why? Because in a world of polycrisis, of climate collapse, of AI acceleration, of geopolitical uncertainty, clients no longer want calm objectivity. They want meaning, they want orientation, sometimes they want moral courage. And increasingly, they're asking, what do you stand for? Where your values matter more than your credentials? We're seeing that with clients asking our law firms for green credentials, for ethical credentials. Our new talent, our younger lawyers whereas in the past they would chase a training contract, they're asking law firms now, where do you stand on certain issues? And that's guiding which firms they go to, where the talent goes. And it's uncomfortable for many professionals who are trained to be neutral. But neutrality is starting to look like complicity, especially when it comes to climate, inequality, or AI ethics. So the future might not belong to the most technically correct expert. It might belong to the most emotionally or morally credible. A third provocation is about time. I mean, especially in the legal system, but I mean, every system in professional life seems to be designed around short-termism, billable hours, quarterly targets, urgent emails, immediate deliverables. But the forces shaping the future, climate breakdown, demographic shifts, long AI trajectories, they require radically longer perspectives. So here's the question. Can a profession built for the present learn to think in centuries? Because some already are. Indigenous-led legal groups are incorporating 7th-generation thinking. Biodiversity advisors are modeling outcomes for the year 2100. Some family law offices are building 500-year trusts. And a handful of strategy teams, my own included, are now trained in applied foresight to help leaders think in decades, not quarters. So maybe this is the rise of the slow professional. Not slow because they're inefficient, not slow because they haven't adopted technology quick enough, but slow because they refuse to accelerate towards collapse. Slow because they are thinking generationally. To be a time rebel in professional life today feels like a radical act, but it may also be the only ethical one. Okay, so my final provocation. What if the future isn't professional at all? So let me explain. Every profession at the moment seems to be a boundaried system. It says who's in and who's out, who's accredited, who's regulated, who's allowed to speak with authority. But in a world increasingly shaped by open knowledge, peer-to-peer platforms and generative AI, those boundaries are starting to crumble. What we're starting to see instead are post-professional constellations, networks of people who don't share the same profession, but who share a commitment to care, to credibility, to collective problem solving. Let me give you an example. So one of the projects I've been looking at recently, in the climate and nature space, we're now seeing groups that include lawyers, Indigenous leaders, scientists, artists, policy analysts, and youth activists, all working together to create legal instruments for a more than human world. And Chancery Lane Project is one such example working in that area. But is the 22-year-old Indigenous data activist from Brazil who codes and litigates but has no official qualification less of a professional than a lawyer fully qualified who's never been outside of the City of London? Is our definition of professionalism just outdated? The future may not be professional, but it may be more ethical, more collaborative, more grounded in care. So let me leave you with this. What if the future of professional services isn't just about becoming faster, smarter, more tech savvy? What if it's about becoming more imaginative? What if our job isn't to preserve the past and past structures and processes, but to prototype better futures? To help not just service providers, but public imagination engines, helping clients and society understand what's possible, what's desirable, what's dangerous. We won't solve 21st century problems with 20th century professional models. We need to rethink what we do, why we do it, how we do it, and who gets to be part of it. So the future of professional services might be messier, might be more plural, less polished, less professional in the old sense. But just maybe it might be fairer, wiser, more human, more hopeful. So, I think I'll leave it there. I'm sure we've got a lot to discuss as we go on, but I think yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara, and plenty to discuss there. Thank you very much. I'm already wondering whether we should be accelerating as TiPS. Doubting our purpose for a moment. Okay, thank you. Paul at Mapped is representing a novel form of law firm / organization, and he'll explain more. Over to you, Paul.
Good morning, everyone. So I guess not as novel now as it was perhaps a few years ago, but MAPT, or the MAPT group, is a group that's come through a management buyout that is now purchasing other legal services firms, primarily in the Northwest. And it's an alternative business structure, an ABS, which means it's no longer owned and operated at the senior level by lawyers, but by business professionals. And that's what makes it slightly different. We have 6 businesses and 9 brands, and those businesses are run, excuse me, by legal professionals as MDs and managing partners of their businesses, but the ownership is slightly different as alternative ways of funding businesses come into the England and Wales legal market. So MAP stands for making a positive difference. So one of the key premises around MAPT is making sure that we have the hand on heart test for our people, our clients, and our community. And we take that seriously. So it's our single value and purpose combined. How do we provide legal services in the right way? And that's kind of grown through our evolution from the Jackson Lees Group into our management buyout, into a range of funding that's allowing us to grow and scale. We leave our businesses in place. We don't assimilate them into the centre. We support them through centralised services where appropriate. So that kind of gives you a bit of an idea of our approach. What I thought I'd talk today about is how we've been approaching AI and how we see AI in legal services. So, as Marty mentioned, we've been involved in TiPS, and timing was useful for us at the time that Microsoft enabled Copilot for smaller organizations. I was able to put an application in to be part of TiPS, and we were successful. And that's allowed us, we've got about 550 team members, and that's allowed us to take 25% of those over the last 9 months, nearly a year, and start learning the role of Copilot and day-to-day AI in the business and how we work. It's a really interesting journey. There's plenty to learn. What I would say is you definitely see the adoption curve in place. You've got early adopters, you've got that kind of gradual improvement in the core middle of your team, and then you have some laggards. And that's no different than most technology. So certainly that's interesting. We're now running at about 75 to 80% adoption in our cohort of 125 users. And we're about to roll out to the rest of the organization from the start of June. We've got some of our teams, certainly our centrally provided services teams, running at 95% adoption, using it on a daily basis. And it really ranges, and it ranges by age, and it ranges by work type. And it ranges by views and the type of person you are. So there's a lot of interesting data, but we shouldn't assume how people feel about AI just because of the group we think they might be in. And that's technology generally in some ways. In terms of what we've seen in AI in legal services in general, and those that are in legal services on this call will have seen this. We've got every tech provider rushing to market to squeeze AI into their existing product, good, bad, or indifferent. And I would just warn to be careful there. Really look at the alternatives, consider what you want to do, because everybody's trying to get in there. Now, what's interesting is no one's coming to market saying, hey, I'm going to build AI in to make my product better for the future. And I'm not going to charge you anymore. They're all rushing to market to look at the cream they can grab, and they're scared of losing market share. So you really have to shop around. And we've done a lot of work as part of TiPS, not only implementing Copilot, but a part of the project was making sure we tested a lot of different third-party tools to get a real understanding of what's working. As we've tested different tools through the last 9 to 12 months, we've seen them improve. The first version was never worth taking in 9 out of 10 cases. So again, I think if you're looking at some of the services now, they're improving a little bit. I think it's worth mentioning on this adoption curve, be careful. I think there's a slightly new category, and I think they're disruptors. And I've never seen those active disruptors in other technology before. Some people don't like using technology and they're a late adopter and they avoid it, but disruptors are different. They're actively looking to not participate. And they have some interesting, viable reasons. That might be the environment that they feel really passionate about. It might be because they're worried about their profession and learning and their position in the world because of their knowledge and their role. I think they can be treated with kindness and compassion and helped to go on a journey, but I think it's really interesting. So I think it's definitely worth watching out for this new category. In terms of one of the important discussions emerging, so as everybody rushes to get AI and to put in place Copilot or any other type of tool, one of the things that's often missed is the state of our technology in the first place. And I think Martin mentioned it was a previous session. Don't forget you can use what you've got in terms of technology. Well, the problem is they don't always have in the legal services sector the right technology to start with. So there's a lot of legal debt in technology. And as we buy businesses, even good businesses, because we're trying to buy businesses that are ready for growth, not in distress, even good businesses are underinvested. So there's a lot of work to be done in the core technology as well as adding this AI layer to it. And one of the challenges there is very much around data. Proprietary data is as important as the technology itself, perhaps even more important as we progress. And as Tara was saying, look at the longer term. If I was doing this again, because we've learned plenty, I'd be spending a lot more time on my infrastructure and my data before I then press the pedal to go and choose the product. Now, the good news in taking a bit of time is that AI is rapidly evolving, the products are better and the choices are better. So I think really look at your data and really ask yourself, have you invested as a business in the technology that you should have to be able to build and move forward in the right way? In terms of the future of legal work, I think a very provocative title, obviously for the right reasons of today's session. I absolutely see lawyers in the future, and I think Tara was alluding to this. There's a bit of hype, isn't there, around we can automate this and we don't need it. A good example outside of this sector is radiologists. Well, we can just get technology to do it. What people are forgetting is, yes, you can, and maybe it'll be more accurate, but a human is still needed in that workflow, that journey, that service. Who's delivering the outcome of that radiologist report? Who's helping bring the human part of it to life? And when clients come along, a big corporate client might come along and say, I need this particular job, and by the way, are you using AI, and how much is that going to save me? They're still buying a holistic service. They're still buying human expertise. And there's a very good chance that we'll see the value and what we can charge for human expertise grow as the overall price is affected by AI. So it's a really interesting position, but I certainly wouldn't be writing off the lawyers yet in the legal services workflows for sure. Now there's definitely some concerning aspects to AI, and it needs careful consideration. They're the obvious ones around the ethics, around transparency, making sure that the AI is reliable, and that it's been trained appropriately, and all those things. And this is why we absolutely need humans in the workflow, so that we can have that sense checking of what we're getting to help us move forward. But I think there are things that we don't know and what we will need to look at. And some of these will be around unintended consequences. And so there are things today, and we haven't done this research yet, but we're going to want to do it, is how does it affect our people in their journey of learning, gaining the credibility in order to pursue their career? Are we affecting the community in a way we hadn't thought of? There are lots of questions to ask. And I certainly think the unintended consequences piece is going to be quite significant in terms of doing more than just the ones that are coming to mind at the moment. And it's something we're definitely going to want to do. I thought I'd share a couple of insights from a couple of Microsoft recent reports. Now, got to take these with a pinch of salt because they're a little self-fulfilling. I think they're still interesting though. And actually, Microsoft is changing. Microsoft was an office platform. It's now becoming a tech platform. And I think for lawyers out there, one of the things that's underutilized in your current suite that you have invested in is Microsoft 365. You're just currently using it for Word and Excel and the main thing being Outlook, but there's a lot more to it. And I think Microsoft got this. They're in every business now. They've just got to find a way to appropriately grow. So whether you use them or not, there are some interesting things that are coming from their research. So they've done the Work Trend Index recently, and they do it every year, and they skew it to the position that they want to obviously portray. But I think it's still interesting. What it's showing, and we're seeing this in other research, is that leaders are now cluing into this and wanting to be involved. And so one of the stats that I'm just going to pick out as an example, 82% of leaders expect to use agents, that's a part of AI, in the next 12 to 18 months in order to address work capacity. And in basically in order to either take pressure off their people or to do more work to be more profitable. And so I think it's worth just picking that out. So the difference between a co-pilot as an assistant versus an agent, very simply, co-pilot itself is the interface to get work done through AI, and the agents are small routines, very focused activities in the background that the co-pilot assistant will talk to them in the background and get work done. And we're going to start to see, and I think the real value of AI is going to become bespoke workflows or bespoke agents that are doing work on our behalf and collaborating in the background. So Microsoft are pushing that hard. That ties into LinkedIn have done a work change report. And again, I think it's worth looking at because there's no particular figure to put out, but it's the basic premise that they're driving, which is around the importance of certain skills in working in the legal sector. So for example, you could obviously, the obvious one, have you used AI before, coming to a business? And we're starting to get candidates saying, what AI are you going to give me? That's really interesting. So that's changing. But also we're looking for that. Have you used it? What's your thoughts? I think the most important thing, though, it pulls out is the human skills. And actually, they become even more important, not less, which is really good because you need somebody that's a great communicator. You need somebody that's empathetic, and you need somebody that I think is going to be able to have a kind of learning mindset. They've got to be able to change rapidly and quickly in order to really succeed as we move forward, because things are going to dramatically change. So if someone can learn quickly, that can be really effective. And we're certainly looking for that type of person. Last couple of things to say to conclude and wrap up. So absolutely, there's a future for lawyers. Humans are needed, absolutely. AI is going to be important and can play a really positive role if we use it right. A recent study, it's the one everyone's talking around from Harvard at the moment with Procter & Gamble. It's the first study that shows really good outcomes on deploying AI to help. Basically, the top line, there's lots of great data in there, but the top line piece around it is an individual using AI outperforms a team that doesn't. That's really interesting for the individual, for productivity, for business growth. Very interesting way of looking at things, and it's really worth taking a look at because there is some great data there on the actual outcomes of using AI. I think to address Tara's, I wrote a little note when Tara was speaking. Firstly, Tara, I love Time Rebel. I think it's really interesting. I'm not sure what I'm going to exactly do with it, but I'm going to go away and think about that. And you mentioned around looking forward and that issue around technology and AI in particular not remembering things. I think the importance of memory in AI is going to be significant, and they're just starting to bring it out. So if you can imagine that you'll have an assistant at home that knows who you are and how to help you, you'll have an assistant at work that remembers what you need and how you work and the workflows it's supposed to use. We're 6 months away from memory in AI being significant. And so I think that's a game changer to a lot of the things that we're trying to address that might cause us challenges. And the only thing I would say is if you're not doing much with AI, don't panic. because there's a bit of hype around it. Best thing to do is don't rush out and grab a tool. Do loads of demos because that will give you experience. But the best thing to do is sit down, have a look at your current technology, make sure your data's in good shape, and then do an AI roadmap that says, how do I move through carefully and take the business on the journey? And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Paul. One thing, if I take chair prerogative and ask briefly before I bring Simone in, you've come from outside the sector, and I was wondering what, as a sort of man from Mars, or at least Birmingham University, I think it was before, when you arrived in the sector and looked at it, and the founders sort of thought about what Mapped could do. What were the thoughts? What was your reaction to sort of looking at this sector and the way it worked in those early days?
They're starting to become a distant memory. I think I've been in one way or another with Mapp now for nearly 6 years, but only one business, and I was brand new to legal service at the time. They hired me because I'd done a lot of work in client-focused areas with technology, and at that time, legal was particularly a laggard in technology and its implementation. So I could bring a lot of things that were proven and worked, and we just had to work how to deploy them in legal. And so we did a range of things, from emailing your clients as a marketing initiative, to bringing in a client experience program, a voice of the customer program, rather than just getting feedback through review solicitors. We took a lot of low-hanging fruit in the early days that's really helped us. And I would have said then, and for most of the last 4 years or so, that legal services is a laggard in tech. What AI has done, though, is it's a leveler. Now, legal services might not be as ready as other businesses, but in terms of where we are right now, we're starting to see legal services talk about technology and AI in ways I've never seen in all this time. So businesses are starting to look at technology as being more important than they were doing 4, 5, 6 years ago, for absolute sure. And I imagine, doesn't matter what size business you are, they're really having these conversations. How much they can actually do and in what position they find themselves is a challenge sometimes. But yeah, that would be my view. I think now, I think it's a bit of a leveler, and I think professional services and legal in particular is in a position to move ahead as fast as most businesses, actually, as long as they've got the investment to do it. And I think part of our in legal services model, unfortunately, is a lot of it is still, partnerships, and partnerships in the way that they take reward means they often take a lot of value out of the business each year, especially as they near retirement. And unfortunately, it's a bit like turkeys for Christmas, I'm afraid. Getting them to invest in technology and look forward, like Tara was saying, is a real challenge.
Thanks very much. We'll perhaps come back to the organisational features later on in discussion. And now let's go over to Simone, please.
Thank
I know
you, Martin.
Simone's researched various sectors, and that may or may not have included for professional services, but let's hear.
Excellent. I'm going to use some slides because I am notorious for going off track. So let's see if I can get those working. Always the challenge when you're talking about technology. Right, can I get a thumbs up from someone if you can see some slides? Thank you so much. So firstly, thank you for inviting me here today. I will start off with the disclaimer that I am in absolutely no way an expert in this sector, but thankfully there are some experts from my organisation in the session. So if you do want to know more about what Innovate does specifically in this area, please go chat to them. And my apologies really to not getting in touch with them beforehand. Sometimes when you're doing futures work, it can be really useful to be the dumb outsider who can ask the stupid questions. So I did somewhat intentionally not get in contact so that I could come in slightly fresh and see if I can be more provocative that way. Or at least that's the excuse I'm going to go with. So as an intro, I'm Simone Boekelaar. I'm the head of Horizon Scanning and Market Insights at Innovate UK. I will put my disclaimer up because I always do this sort of thing of basically don't invest based on anything I say. You're mostly in these professions, so you understand the value of a good disclaimer. So firstly, starting with UKRI. UKRI is one of the government's key methods for supporting research and innovation across the UK. It's made up of the 9 research councils, of which Innovate UK is the council that supports innovation in businesses. At Innovate, we basically support businesses to innovate in various ways. So we support business-led innovation, both understanding how to improve it and accelerate it, and to support the fundamental development of research into innovation and then into adoption and delivery. We do this in a few ways. So things like access to knowledge, such as our knowledge transfer partnerships, where we can embed an expert into your organization for specialist projects. We run a lot of networks and convening type things, so lots of events and innovation networks in specific areas to start building and to connect academics, small businesses and large businesses in particular. We provide access to key infrastructure through organizations such as the Catapults. So this is ways that businesses, while you're developing a new technology or developing a new product, it might be cost prohibitive to invest in the entire set of kit, you can access kit and expertise whilst innovation is underway. And then finally, the bit that most people know about us is the access to finance. So whether that's investor loans, investment partnerships, or the good old-fashioned collaborative R&D grant, we're there as effectively a funding source of last resort to help good ideas turn into great innovations. So why do we worry about the future, and getting into why does my job exist, really? So we need to know about the future so that we can prepare for it, really. No one can predict the future. That's sort of the biggest disclaimer in my type of role, is saying we're not trying to predict. We're trying to understand a range of possibilities and then think about how we might react to those should we see them starting to emerge. So that's challenges like accelerating change. So I think that's one thing we've all seen in the world over the last 25 years in particular, is rapidly accelerating change. And that is a really hard thing, particularly for small businesses, to react to and adapt to. But by looking at the longer term trends, understanding where potential disruptors and opportunities are for your organization, looking in that longer term, you can start to work out where you will act early or start to prepare early to be ready for it. Similarly, we're in an increasing systems of systems type world. The complexity between different organizations, different sectors, different systems in society is getting more and more complex. So improving our understanding of the systems helps to improve how we can respond to disruptors or changes in those systems. With the caveat, obviously, that our knowledge is always incomplete. As I said, we can't predict the future. We'll never stop being surprised. But we can be aware and think about potential shocks and disruptions and how we might respond to them. And finally, this one, hidden future, current comfort. Change is hard. Adaptation is hard. If we act as though the world remains unchanging, it's even harder. So at least if we're thinking about change and being prepared for change, then we can respond in more effective and hopefully for our organizations value-adding ways. So what does my team do in this space? So my team's the sort of 10 plus years ahead outlook. So our sector experts, like the ones on the call, are focused on really the now to 10 years ahead, what's happening in the industry. They're experts on the specifics of what's going on and what's coming up. My team's there to think about what's the big picture stuff coming down at us. What are the big macro trends, and in some cases micro trends, that are going to impact us, and how can we be ready? And particularly because of where we sit in UKRI, we have access to these wonderful range of academics, so we can do a lot of exploration in what are the big technologies that are coming up that others might not be seeing. So about a third of what we do is internal for our own strategy. So we sit in the strategy function. We're there to help make sure our own strategy as Innovate UK is robust, and practicing all these wonderful skills about how do we tweak it as these disruptions come through. About a third of what we do is sharing our knowledge across government, and to make sure we're building the innovation ecosystem to be thinking about futures and long-term innovation and business opportunities. And then finally, we work with industry, particularly small and medium enterprises, to help them think about the future, to start embedding futures thinking, and basically to help them start de-risking their own strategies and directions. Because I know as an SME, sometimes going beyond 2 pay cycles is a huge challenge. We run events and things to help people step out for a few hours to think that 10-year look ahead, to just take that time out, have the exploration and take that back to their own organizations. So how do we do futures, or how can we do futures? This is sort of an example of a starter way that you might want to embed it in your company if you're not already thinking this way. So I've shamelessly stolen from McKinsey's Future of Work report, where they say everything really comes down to two questions: how will you make money, and how will the work get done? I think that's quite fair. So an easy starter way to think about futures would be taking, if trend X happens, how would we answer these two questions? I think that leads to quite an interesting discussion, and you could even use it as a nice sort of icebreaker in a corporate meeting somewhere to pick a random trend and have a free-flowing discussion and get people thinking creatively and wildly and out of it. And this is my favorite thing about futures, really, is getting into the creativity, right? No one will be right about the futures. We're all equally wrong. It gives us a nice safe space to explore the possible, and to even explore some of the issues we're facing today. What will they look like in the long run? And if we're all going to be wrong about it, we can all have a nice even discussion. But it means we've explored a wide range of possibilities, and we can think about, okay, which one's going to be more likely and which ones do we want to prepare for? So coming back to those mega trends, where do you find them? All sorts of places. Obviously, there's nice commercially available ones like Gartner and Frost & Sullivan and people like that. There's nice government-generated ones, so NATO and the EU. But really, take your pick of whatever trends decks you find out there, and they really cluster back into about 7 different major categories. So regardless of what you choose, as long and sometimes the least relevant it looks to your business can sometimes have the most interesting futures discussions. So if you do try some of these activities, feel free to have a play around. But to get into some that I think could lead to an interesting discussion around this professional services bit today, I'm going to start delving first into a bit of a demography trend. So this one, I've got a near-term and a longer-term one. So in the near term, we're seeing a bit of an expertise gap emerge. So this is obviously as we have people coming into retirement increasingly, we've got a lot of people exiting the workforce and taking a lot of their knowledge with them. And we've not necessarily been filling that space as quickly as people are leaving. And so that's starting to lead to a little bit of a void in knowledge and a bit of a disconnect between the skills that are needed and what's available. So in many cases, this is a void that technology can come in and fix or support. And so I think this is one of the reasons why AI will gain some more traction over the next few years, because it is a way that we can start filling some of those needs. However, as you know, Paul and Tara have much more eloquently than me mentioned, this leads to an really interesting range of challenges, of movements in how the services industries will change, a difference in the skills needed. And I think coming back to a point that Tara made, the rise in the value of creativity, I think, is a really interesting trend that we're going to see coming through. This is the bit where human in the loop adds the judgment, adds the creativity in how you respond to the challenge, adds the value that even in the next 10 years AI will struggle to come up with on its own. And I think that particular skill set will be an interesting one to see how we change our value of it in society over coming years. I think similarly to that, I know it's been discussed for the last 10 years or so around legal training and things already, but certainly the ways of training people, I don't think we necessarily know yet what will work in this new environment. You know, how important were those years of, 18-hour days of going through past cases to build up your knowledge versus coming in, allowing the AI to tell you the case law and then making a judgment on it. I don't think we entirely know the impact of or how important certain elements of foundation training are, and that I think is a challenge that we're going to need to work on in the near term. On the other side of that is this living longer element. So with health technologies rising, with genetics treatments coming through, with improved food and nutrition, we are starting to live longer. And certainly if we're looking 20, 30 years ahead, 120 year life with 100 years of good health is not particularly out of reach. what does that mean for professional services? What does that mean for a career path? If you've got a 60 to an 80-year career, how is that going to be managed by people? What roles need to change? What new roles will be created in that? How do we manage the HR and the pensions and all the other associated services around that? I think even just the fact of people living longer and having longer knowledge spans will be quite an interesting change in how our offices and our office space work runs. And then obviously the question of how adaptable are people in maybe that last 20 or 40 years of their career? Will, even with health improving, will adaptability remain the whole way through? Or will we have new challenges of having to reskill in different ways as we get longer into our life? Some provocations. The second one I wanted to get into is this ongoing trend of work as an activity. So it's been around for quite a while. I think the gig economy was one of the earliest weak signals. And this is the move from work being somewhere that you go to work being just the activities that you do and may or may not be completely disconnected from the place element entirely. So starting with the gig economy, I think we saw that. That's obviously with COVID, that very much accelerated. And I think even with a rise in back to office mandates, it's not entirely reversed back to that. So with enabled by technology, AI, digital and communication tools, etc., it does open up how we work and how we remunerate people, how people focus on what they do and how they build their careers and their networks. I think also the ability to engage with people in different locations more easily opens both a wider workforce and a wider range of potential clients to people. So maybe that opens up at a global level alternative ways to access the skill sets that we need if we've got certain countries where we've got the big age gap forming and others where there is a youthful workforce coming through. Do they need to move to the UK? Not necessarily. Are there other ways to train and get people involved? We shall see. And then finally, when we combine that with technology such as robotics, we may even see this work as an activity bit moving to more traditional blue-collar jobs as well. So more remote operation of robotics rather than necessarily being on site building a wall. And that could lead to very interesting changes in what it means to work, how to work, and the surrounding services that are needed to manage that. And then finally, a bit on technology. So I think we've got a lot on AI, so I'm not going to do that as much because I think Tara and Paul have managed it much, much better than I. But I did like this point from Gartner that they think AI-first organizations will destroy productivity in their search for it. And I think that's absolutely Paul's warning of AI is not an amazing solution for everything. It's not magic. It's much like every other tool. It needs to be deployed thoughtfully, meaningfully, and in an appropriate way for your organization, or it will frankly cause more challenges than it will help. So just like we've gone through adopting of IT and moving from faxes to the internet and moving from typewriters to computers, this is something that will take time for everyone to get on board with and take time to understand it, to do it properly and effectively. And similarly, with every new technology, new requirements, new risks will emerge, which will drive new suppliers and partnerships for all types of companies, including professional services. I think particularly in the professional services space, stronger cybersecurity type relationships are going to be absolutely critical. I think we've already seen, obviously, with the retail sector recently, what those attacks look like. When you're going, obviously, into legal, the privacy elements are even more necessary and will need even stronger cybersecurity. I think, as Paul mentioned, getting into bespoke AI applications, we're not seeing too much yet, but I think there's opportunities there. And I think we've got a need, again, I think as both Paul and Tara alluded to, around this behavioural science piece of how do people react, how do we encourage them to adopt, how do we make them comfortable with change, and that sort of thing. So yes, acceptance and adoption very much non-linear, which I think is fitting what we're seeing already. But as AI goes from being single-use, generative, simple solution AI, as we progress towards artificial general intelligence, where AI will be equal or superior to humans at a wide range of tasks, that's going to need a very interesting change in acceptance by society to progress towards that. And when we get to that more extreme end of AI, that will really potentially raise the big question of, are lawyers still needed? Because if they can outperform us in all ways, including creativity, what does that mean for us as society? Now, my final one, this is where I get to go from being sort of the normal types of technologies that we're talking about in this area, and I went a little bit extreme to think about some of the things outside this space that we might not normally think about. So starting with brain-computer interfaces. So this is technologies embedded, which basically connect the brain to a computer in various ways, whether that's an implant, whether it's a cap measuring brain signals, various other methods are underway. But if we're looking really at, this is 2050 and beyond type stuff here, I think, what does that mean? That will be an absolutely new way of doing work, particularly office work. It will be a new style of communication if it's brain to computer or even brain to brain. We'll have gone from phone to email to voice notes by generation. Maybe the next generation will want to communicate by brain upload. How does that mean for how we communicate data? What will be the cybersecurity needs about that? What does that mean? I think going back to Tara's point of, if we're not the main expert in the room, that trend is even more accelerated by brain-computer interfaces. How does that then lead to lawyers and professional services operating? Could you just upload to a client, the knowledge is there instantly, and it's a really different business model, I think, there. As I put in, connecting with a client could be a rather more literal element. Human augmentation. So this is making us stronger, faster, smarter through, in the near term, it's through tablets or new drugs, etc. In the longer term, it might be more physical augmentation of stimulating brain implants or exoskeletons or embedded strength devices. Firstly, there's a really good role, I think, for the legal system and insurance, etc., around how far is too far, around what it means to be human, about where's that line between human responsibility and the software that is partly running you. That's, I think, going to create a whole new world of legal stuff, which may be because the AI won't have seen it before, still needs us as humans to come in and interpret and create, which is quite interesting. But also, if people are that much smarter, do they still need professional services? If you can, between the brain-computer interface and the human augmentation, upload the entire history of law instantaneously, do we still need lawyers? Interesting questions. And then finally, another little out there one, autonomous transport. So this is going to truly autonomous vehicles. So when the driver is no longer needing to do anything in the vehicle, when the liability for the vehicle is off with the software designer or the car company rather than the driver itself, and we are really just sitting within a cube that's moving to wherever we need to be. Could that change how we work in the professional services? Could you be taking your office on the move with you? Do you sit in a mobile office in the morning and it takes you off to meet a client because face-to-face interaction has become more valuable again because we can move around in a green, clean, air-conditioned space? Similar to the first point, this is, again, maybe you can connect your mobile office with your client's mobile office and form an office that way rather than needing big tower blocks. Again, connecting with clients in a completely different way. So different futures from maybe the practical ones that we've been speaking about in earlier in the session, but maybe some slightly more odd interest and unusual elements to start ponder about where the future might take you. And on that note, I will leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Simone. Yes, a few mind-bending thoughts there indeed. Having just trailed back from London with my exhibition stand equipment and extension needs and all the trappings of being at Accountex, I could do with some of the mobile office, I think. Lots of broad perspectives, more specific industry-specific perspectives. I would like now to hand over to Katie Mason, can quickly introduce herself and maybe engage a bit with Tara's comments, especially on I think all the themes of morality, ethics, values, identity, and what it's going to be all about to be a lawyer or something like one. Take it away, Casey.
Thank you. I mean, that amazing presentations from all our panelists there. Some of the work I've been doing over past years has been really interested in sort of where do ideas come from, how do imaginaries get constructed of new worlds, and then what sort of realities do those imaginaries produce. I'm minded of the role of science fiction and Star Trek in the creation of the flip mobile phone. And so these things do really matter. We might treat them as flip and as unachievable, but actually they do change the way people start to perform the world. And so I think professional bodies and the way they represent and talk about possible futures, just as we have today, especially you, Simone, just then about, you know, presenting things that are out of our reach at the moment, but they start to sit in people's minds and start to shape possibilities and action. And then I was always also really mindful of both through the very name of MAP, making a positive difference, and the conversation that Tara provocatively presented around what are our values, what do we care about, how can we be more human. We know that many people can't afford professional services, they can't get access to counselling services or legal services or accounting services, but many more besides. And so is there a way of reimagining a future here and presenting some form of imaginaries and taking control of those so that they have values and things we care about, to create a better society for all embedded into them? So I just thought, Tara, if I came to you first.
Sorry, I thought you froze there for a moment. If you come to me first, just to respond to some of those things. Just before I do jump, I was really interested, Simone was talking about the human brain interface, because we have actually done some work looking at neurotechnology in the law, and I feel that's actually a lot closer than some people might think. It's more of the sci-fi side. I think it's, in terms of values, I think something we haven't mentioned yet, but is gaining a lot of attention at the moment, is the environmental impact of using these systems. And I remember originally when ChatGPT came out and a few of us were trialing it, and somebody jokingly said to me, "Oh, if you say please and thank you, you get a better response." And I thought, well, that might just be a humorous thing that OpenAI might have coded into these systems. And now you hear just the act of saying please or thank you, the environmental impact, the amount of water that it takes, the amount of energy to run these systems in terms of the minerals, the water for the cooling, and the idea that companies are thinking about putting the water cooling systems in areas that are already very water deprived. So it raises some questions for me around how much can we talk about AI in terms of productivity and efficiency when actually it's having this massive planetary impact, and also how much of some of the decisions that we're making today around regulation, around values, around planetary resources, shutting down the possibilities of these tools for tomorrow. I think it's important to remember that these tools are still fairly fragile. I mean, hallucinations are still quite common. And I mean, we've really seen that AI can confidently produce citations of legal cases that don't exist. And we've seen something that's already led to sort of real world sanctions against lawyers. But I think we're witnessing a moment of collective re-education. It's not about what AI is. It's not intelligence, it's probability. It's predicting language. It's not knowledge, but it's imitation. I think with something like generative AI, it's become really convincing. It's become really that sort of personal engagement. And I think big tech is sort of scrambling reputationally around this and what's happening, but they're also racing to deploy models faster and faster. And I think that reveals something very human about this moment, that we build faster than we understand. And I think there is value in thinking about legal questions and value in engaging. And I know this session was kind of framed by Richard Susskind, and there's some really interesting things that he said about the difference between process and outcome, which you might get into later. But I think how rules apply to a case, how we engage as humans, the nuances, and how we interpret legal questions, I think there is value in what you don't automate as well. I won't hog the speaking.
I think that's really interesting, Tara, and I guess some of the conversations that we're having today is about how we put some of those, our consciousness and our concerns, at the center of future imaginaries, so that they remain present and remain shaping our actions. So I've heard various things about AI and its consumption of energy, one of which is we'll solve that pretty quickly technologically, and the other is it's doing massive damage and we need to stop it immediately. So I think even the tensions between these things, we're not always including those in the conversations and in the decisions we're making. So how we keep those present in imaginaries, I think, is quite a challenge. I wonder, Paul, if you have a take on that, and if climate and values and the care of people is obviously in your business, but are the planetary values in your business as well?
Of course, I think it's actually a very difficult one, because there are those two extreme views, and the reality is somewhere in between. And so we do our best. I think it's a really challenging time. I think technology has always been a challenge. AI has not suddenly created an environmental impact that didn't exist before. Exponentially, it's created a much bigger one. But technology has always been challenging, and of course we're trying to tackle that already. So we do that. I mean, we sit down and we take secondhand laptops because we're trying to reduce the number of new ones. When it comes to AI, we've decided, I mean, it's a really difficult one. So again, how do you go with the best bet to be better? So one of the reasons for choosing Microsoft is that it's committed. Now, I hope because of its size, its scale, and its own social responsibility, that it delivers on its promise. A big company, you've got to, we're having trust in that. The reason that gives us some degree of reassurance is that they're going to have to solve it, and they've got the resources to try and do it and the technology access to do it, where a smaller provider might not. You'll notice in smaller providers, when you speak to them, they find that much more difficult depending on who they're using to provide their service. So it's a very difficult one. We've got to be aware of it. We've got to look at the options, and we've got to make sure that we're using products that are doing the best at that time. But so from an environmental point of view, technology moves forward, you've got to adopt that, but you've also got to do your best to choose the right solutions that ultimately minimize the damage, and hopefully get to a point where we're in a really good position, and hopefully there's a degree of technology solving that. The people side of things is an easier one to talk about, actually. I think in most of the cases, I mentioned earlier about the unknowns, and that's the only bit we really haven't got focused in on what it could be. I think we're working with our people to make sure that we understand, it can be fearful, it can be exciting, it can differ by individual. We've got to be careful about how we deploy training. I think everybody most probably feels this. Businesses aren't great at training new technology. They're good at buying it. And that's what TiPS has been about. So we've learned a lot, actually. One of our big findings was that, we are just not using the technology we've got as we start to pile on more. So we're investing much more in adoption and training and thinking through those things. So I think I mentioned disruptors. It is a negative term, but we've got to treat them carefully and support them and have those conversations. Some of those conversations are really valuable. People caring about the environment and not wanting to use AI and feeling really passionate about it. And so our job is to work out, well, how do we support you? How can we find a way through that? They're outliers, but they're still really important. And often they're the people so passionate they're prepared to speak out about it as well. So we've got to remember where they appear outliers, maybe they're not outlying as far as we think. So Matt, we're doing our best. I think it's a challenging, fast moving, and to some degree there's elements of confusion in there. You know, what do we do? What's the right way? What are other people doing? How do we benchmark? So I guess my response is doing our best with good intention. Will we get it all right? No.
Thanks, Paul. Just come to Simone on that, how we keep those values, societal values, so caring for everybody, being inclusive as we possibly can, creating moral markets, so we're still trading and exchanging, but that those values become part of the infrastructure. How does that fit into the sort of the way Innovate are directing futures, imagining horizons, and then channeling money to make it happen, because that's where the imaginaries actually start to perform new worlds?
Absolutely. So societal impact has always been a key element of all of our assessments for funding for at least the last 10 years, and so that continues. On the horizon scanning side, it is making sure that part of our role is to have these sorts of discussions, to get involved in this sort of forum, and to host our own, to make sure well before, ideally before where we've got to an AI, and to learn our lessons for other technologies, that we are having the discussions, particularly things around human augmentation, future of longevity, things like that, now, so that we are getting those ethics discussions underway with both the people developing the technologies and the people who will be the consumers in the future, to understand how far do we want to go? Where do we need to regulate? Can we regulate right from the development phase of the technology, or do we wait till it's up and running and then try and rapidly regulate when it gets to application? And there's debates either way over which one's most effective. But the fact is, those conversations need to happen, and part of that means finding these technologies early and getting that underway, which is a key part of what we try to do. And then the second bit is also discussing the solutions that are out there that we need to co-support. So in our world, a key part of that is technology convergence. So that's the recognition that you need multiple technologies maturing and coming together to reduce the overall negative impacts of a single technology. So for AI, we're supporting things like neuromorphic computing, which is very low energy edge computing type technologies. Similarly, biological compute and even compostable electronics, so that for any devices that are using AI, they can return afterwards. We're seeing things like retrofit. So I sit up in Aberdeen, so retrofitting decommissioned oil rigs to be undersea data centers, because you've got the natural cooling of the North Sea and you can install it in an existing rig. So it's sort of a win-win of using not damaging the environment further and finding ways that are less damaging to cool stuff. And then finally, one example is 10 years ago, we struggled to find any economic business case for small modular nuclear reactors. And I remember in the other half of my role, which is sort of doing the business cases for our shorter term programs, and we were going, where on earth would you use this? What is the use case at scale for this? And now we're seeing the Amazons and the Alphabet starting to actively invest in these sorts of technologies, because a small modular nuclear reactor is at least slightly greener way of powering a large-scale data center. So these parallel investments in other supporting and enabling technologies alongside the key technology itself, combined with how far as society will we accept things? What are our biggest concerns, and what can we use in terms of innovation, regulation, and future technologies to address those things, all coming together, I think is a key part of what we're trying to help and deliver.
Brilliant. Thank you, Simone. Martin has some questions that have been popping up in the chat, so over to you, Martin.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Katie. I'll just there are a stack of questions, and I'm conscious that we've well, only a quarter of an hour left of our allotted time, so we'll get onto those shortly. Before we do, I just wanted to ask perhaps Simone and Tara especially, we're founding TiPS. One of the things that firms find difficult to do is, even as you mentioned, Simone, just think about next week, or part of the acceleration logic is, well, don't put it off till next year or the year after. Do something now and make time for it. Just innovation in the short term. How do you, for firms who are on the call and out there, how they need to think about the longer term? how do you make time for it? And we don't have much time for you to answer about time, but quickly, what have you found works to get people just to get out of the day job and think about the longer term? Simone.
I think our starting point is finding easy ways to incorporate it into your management level meeting. So
Yeah.
like the suggestion I gave of using it as the icebreaker, it's enabling, so futures can often be done in 20 to 40 minute chunks just to get people into the mindset. And if you're doing that at the start of your strategy or your long-term planning meetings with that sort of exercise, you're at least opening up your minds so that you're not focused on the next 6 months. You've started with the broader mindset, and then obviously it will narrow back as you get into more discussions. But sometimes starting with the easy activities, building it in. I mean, in oil and gas, we always had safety moments at the start of every meeting. You could challenge yourself to have a futures moment, even if that's someone just reporting on a big trend that might impact you, and just to start building it into an everyday mindset rather than we're off on a strategy away day and this piece of paper is just going to sit on the shelf forever type thing. You want easy things built in regularly to just keep that mindset open constantly.
Yeah, thanks. Brilliant. Tara, anything on that to just
I completely agree with Simone. It's about finding the small chunks of time and trying to get it to be a habit of what you look at, because a lot of people will scan the headlines, they'll scan newspapers, getting that sort of further push. I mean, for our larger firms, a lot of them have dedicated resources to be able to engage with this. The small firms that don't, we provide briefings. I do PESTLE analysis, just try and get them to engage in that. And then I think with a lot of our foresight work, it's the bridge. It's helping, not just saying, oh, this is the next 5 years, this is the next 10 years, here you are. It's actually helping them bridge from where they are now to what changes, what they might be able to think about now for that future.
Thank you. And Paul, you doing any of this kind of thing?
Not as structured as that, but I do like it. It's a great tip, actually. We're making them dedicated meetings that we're having in different teams, and make it either an agenda item or a meeting that's dedicated to talking around the role of AI or the role of technology or where we're at. But I do like the idea of just building in that kind of muscle day-to-day habit. So there's a learn to take away and have a go at, for sure.
Thank you. Okay, now Ilona may be able to help me with this. I'm going to scroll up and take questions not entirely randomly, but not very systematically either. Okay, and if briefly people want to, the audience members right out there want to articulate or add to my summary of the question, Martin Off from Innovate UK asks, while we could agree that we cannot imagine a world without lawyers, he'd like to know, would we need fewer lawyers and how much? How many fewer? 25%, 33%? Or do we have a sense of the impacts of technology and change on the composition of the workforce, maybe? Anyone want to offer a quick answer?
I think, yes, there will be fewer, but I think we will define them differently. It won't be taking lawyers as we understand them today and then putting them into a changed future. And I think it comes down to, again, referencing Richard Susskind, and he was asking, these sorts of questions. Will we need lawyers for the future? How many lawyers will we need? It's the wrong question to ask. And he's very strong on the sort of problem solving aspect and saying lawyers as we know them today are the best solutions that we have for fixing the problems that we have. And he'll say clients won't go into a law firm and go, I'd like to buy some judgment, please. They just want their problem to go away. And Richard suggests there are other solutions and other ways using AI that we might find to deal with some of the legal issues. That means lawyers as a title might go away, or lawyers as we understand them today. But I think there are going to be all sorts of roles around data management, sense making, judgment, ethical decision making. I think lawyers, for me, will morph. I think fewer in the sense that perhaps for every profession, every industry is going to see shifts in the workforce. That's my shout.
Thank you. And I'll skip through a few topics rather than ask everyone's view on every question. Jane McCants from Thorntons. Perhaps for for both Tara and Simone. Jane, do you want to put that question about data information?
Hi there. So thank you for that. It was really, really fascinating.
Oh, you have to speak up a bit, Jane.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Just about.
Oh, not sure why I'm so quiet.
Go for it.
Sorry.
Go on. Go on.
Okay.
We'll manage.
So no, I just wondered
That's better.
what insights or research that we would need to gather to inform our horizons. Because as a firm, we're thinking about those alternative futures that you've spoken about, and I'm really interested, how do we inform those so that we aren't just using guesswork? You know, where can we start to pull insights from to lead us as closely as possible to those futures where we can? So a really useful place I've found to start is the Government Office for Science's Futures Toolkit, which leads you through a multitude of ways to do futures to answer different sorts of questions you might find in an organization. It's designed for government, but frankly, it applies really well, I think, to business as well. To find the information around that, I think it is, it depends really on the type of question that you're wanting to ask. If you're asking a big sort of long-term trend-based question, then it is just going out and finding any of the trend decks from sort of a reputable name and taking that as the background, and then having the internal creativity to explore how that applies to your business. So what's the so what of that particular scenario to your business? For the shorter term stuff, it might be worth, you know, dedicating a couple of hours to gathering some reports from the usual, you know, management consultancy type reports and some bits and pieces to pull together a bit of an overview of what you want to talk about. But if you're spending more than a couple of hours on preparing for something, it's probably going to take you out of the space where you want to be creative about how it applies, and you might be over sciencing the knowledge behind it, if that makes sense. There's some benefits to being informed but not too informed, because if you're too informed, then you might just be applying someone else's view of the situation to your business, whereas you want to know enough that you can explore the situation for your business, if that makes any sense at all. It's often quite uncomfortable for people, particularly when they come from analytical backgrounds. So I'm an engineer and economist by background, and I work with a lot of scientists, and they're all very quite literal people. And to encourage them to think creatively and to not be right about things can be a challenge. And if you and myself entering this job, I have to constantly go, I'm not here to be right, I'm here to explore. So there's that bit of helping yourself be comfortable, I think, about it, as well as gathering enough information, but not too much. That's super helpful. Thank you.
I'm happy to, if we're short on time, I'm happy to follow up afterwards. But just to echo what Simone said, and to say, we tell participants at our workshops, take your being right hat off at the door and put your making it hat up on. And I mean, I come from an arts background, so I'm interested in pushing that sort of creative side. And I was going to say, as well as the management reports and the sources that Simone mentioned, it's interesting to follow some of the blogs or the Twitter streams of the more left field people, because sometimes you can see those sparks of emerging signals emerging from other industries or other sort of creative sectors that will have ripple effects.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thanks very much. I'd just like to just sidestep slightly and ask Ilona, who has our project manager, who also has a background in futures and policy, and especially on work and young professionals' work. I wondered, Ilona, if you wanted to just throw in a quick question or comment on that topic area of yours.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, actually, I do have one question in mind. This is from my background in happiness. I'm a happyologist. How do you see all these changes in technology and AI and all? How can they impact, or let's say benefit, people's happiness at work? So we're talking about well-being in broad sense. We're talking of balancing different parts of lives, different priorities, but also flourishing at work. What positive outcomes for people's well-being at work can you see? That would be lovely to hear.
Shall I have a start on that?
Yes, do, Paul. Yeah.
I think there are quite a few. I think one of the things to take away or at least to think about when deploying AI as an example, or any technology, is that the business isn't taking all the benefit for profitability. And that's the common conversation that's kind of out there in terms of it's all about better productivity and profit. But in reality, it's a bit of sharing between three areas. You're going to get some benefit for your people. So that can be perhaps the work environment, the pressure to their day. It could be that those tools help them manage their day better. Maybe they're neurodivergent, and now you can help support them in a better way. The business is going to take a slice of the benefit, and that's where the profitability comes in. And then you've got your client that's benefiting, which obviously, if a happy client, then that client's more likely to recommend you as the worker and the lawyer. So the benefits from this technology and AI are just not being driven to the bottom line. They're being shared out, and hopefully that then leads to the bottom line in the end. So I think employee experience, particularly with tech, is an absolutely under-delivered area. And to be happy at work, we've got to get that right, almost get it to be seamless, so that you can do your work really well supported. And that's what's going to make people really productive and stay, and retainment. That would be.
Do you mind if I squeeze one more question in? Just one more. We're nearly at time, but thanks, Ilona. And this is, if Andreas is still on the call, Andreas Schroeder, ask about, fire away, Andreas, if you do it very quickly, your question on competitive landscape for legal services. Zooming out.
Yeah. Hope you can hear me. I have no idea how lawyers effectively, how the legal services, how they effectively compete. But that is usually, for me, the source of seeing how technologies will be used and will shape up. So if it gives a competitive advantage, then it will usually happen. And competitive advantage is not just, profitability. It can be cost. It can be, creativeness. It can be flexibility, agility. So how do they compete, and how will that change through AI?
Can you take us? Go on, Paul. Yeah.
I can give a. So how do they compete in the long term? They compete through earned growth, which is recurring revenue, recommendation, and retention, ultimately. In the short term, they're dealing with the usual mix. Are they getting the right price? Are they responding to the brief, and all those things? But I think genuinely below all of that, it's trust driven. Clients are looking for, can I get the expertise I need? Do I get the outcome I want? Can I trust this business to deliver for me? And they may ask you, do you have AI and all the rest of it? Of course, because they're looking at the right price. But it's the humans in the element and how that wraps together. So I think it's going to mean we've got to move quicker. We've got to be smarter. I think to get work, we've got to have the right package. But I think to sustain it and retain it, it's not changing dramatically. AI just reinforces it, in my view. That would be the way to look at it from my perspective, I think.
I might offer a little answer myself, and then I think we do have to call a close. From our previous project, Andrew's question made me think of firms who've found themselves becoming expert in their clients' businesses to the extent that they, rather than, for example, handling lots of insurance claims based from workplace accidents, for example, become experts in their clients' workplaces and then become HR consultants almost, or safety consultants. So they're moving into what one firm we work with called near legal services, which is the things that impact on the core legal services. And so I think there's an interesting question there about who are you competing against? Is it other law firms or management consultants or procurement consultants or whatever? So I think that there's some interesting stuff going on. We could go on for hours, I get the impression. We've got plenty of questions still that we could look at in the chat. Fabulous provocations from our panelists, but we do have to stop. And I think it's been an exciting end to the festival. Can we electronically or somehow say thank you to our panelists, Simone, Tara, and Paul. This is the end of our festival week, and others will remind me what I should be telling everyone to do. Please connect with us. We're going to be now running until, at least this is TiPS, running until at least on some basis until March next year. And so our mission now, having finished most of our delivery of support to firms, is to make sense of what we've been doing in a bit more systematic way, capture it, create some resources that will be useful to firms and policymakers. We'd love to be engaged with everyone involved, everyone here and beyond, to make that as useful and as effective a process as possible. So please get in touch. We'll be running more events. We're carrying on with Katie's work on the market, the wider sector, if you like, this ecosystem around tech and professional services firms. And so we might come knocking on your door and ask you to participate in that. We hope there might be just the possibility of some future funding to do some more. Okay, it's been a fabulous session and I've enjoyed the week enormously. Hope it's been useful to those that have seen some or all of it. I think we'll have to call a close there. Have a great rest of Friday weekend, and thank you again to all our panelists for all your support.